So the first thing that you have to understand is that there is a cell which is infected with a virus. And in this case, it was a CMV infected cell. CMV stands for cytomegalovirus. It's a common virus that can cause a chronic infection. Here we have the nucleus. And because this cell is infected with cytomegalovirus, it makes its normal proteins on the cell surface so that the cells of the immune system would recognize it. But it also puts a little portion of that cytomegalovirus protein out on the surface to let the immune cells know that it's an infected cell. And so these regular proteins that are made in the cell are known as an MHC1. That's not that important to understand, but that's the name of the protein. This here is a portion of the virus that lets the immune system know that it is in fact an infected cell. There are other proteins that are also on the cell, and these proteins help immune cells dock with them so that they can make the appropriate determination of whether or not this cell should be destroyed or should survive. And this protein is known as ICAM. I-C-A-M. So far, so good. Now, let's bring in our immune cell. It's our cytotoxic T cell. It's responsible for going around and making sure that cells are not infected and taking care of cells that are infected. And these would be the cells that would be going around and getting rid of coronavirus-infected cells so they don't produce more virus to infect more cells. And in fact, if this can be done early in the course, you would have a limited disease and it wouldn't lead to many, many cells being infected, causing many T cells to have to try to fight and causing that cytokine storm. Well, there's a couple of proteins on these T cells. So this is a T cell, and it's a cytotoxic T cell. Not toxic to you, but cytotoxic to the cell that's infected. These are actually your friends. So there is a receptor on the T cell that sees that little particle of the virus and understands that this cell needs to be destroyed, and that is called the T cell receptor, or the TCR. The TCR also activates right next to it, and I'll show this here in green, that it's activating the beta integrin. This interaction between beta integrins and the ICAMs allow for a very strong docking that allows these cells to bind very, very strongly to these infected cells. And that allows these T cells to secrete cytokines that will shut down and kill the cell before it produces more viruses. So it's very important that the beta integrins and the ICAMs are able to bind together. Normally, the beta integrins are not activated, and they will not bind these ICAMs. Otherwise, your immune system would start to destroy your own body. So they're shut down. But there are certain situations where they need to be turned on. And if they are not turned on, your immune system is not going to work very well. Well, in this case, it is the TCR which activates these beta integrins and allows this to occur. The purpose of this article was to see whether or not things can affect this turning on of the beta integrins. And sure enough, they discovered that there is a receptor called the G-alpha S receptor. And this receptor is coupled to what is known as a G protein, and it's coupled to an enzyme known as adenylate cyclase. There's a lot of moving parts to this receptor, but I'm going to simplify it and show you that essentially it takes ATP, which is abundant in the cell, and it converts it into something called cyclic AMP. And as it turns out, cyclic AMP shuts down the ability of the TCR to activate the beta integrase. So the question is what is actually stimulating this G-alpha S receptor? There's a number of things that can activate this. One of them is epinephrine, typically dopamine, histamine, serotonin. And the thing about all of these things that can actually stimulate this receptor here, they're all quite elevated when you are awake. And so you can see it's possible that epinephrine, dopamine, histamine, serotonin could stimulate this receptor, which would eventually convert ATP into cyclic AMP, which would then inhibit TCR's ability to have the beta integrin bind with ICAM and to have this T cell destroy with cytokines this infected cell. So, is it possible that sleep could stop epinephrine, dopamine, histamine, and serotonin from binding this receptor and allow the beta integrin and the ICAM to bind tightly so that the immune response would be more robust?